Midterm elections set for tomorrow, and certainly you know about all the candidates and the ones that throw stuff on the floor because they show those pictures, and it's always grainy and it's always black and white. But here's why you vote for our guy, because he's apparently in color and in focus. You notice that? It's like the before shots on weight loss things. Fat people are always out of focus, but they drop the weight, they're shiny, they're in color, they got nice clothes. I don't understand it. Also, some bills out there, and senior attorney for the Advancement Project, Denise Lieberman, joins on the program, joins us to talk early voting. It is Amendment 6. A lot of conversation about this one. Busy times for you, Denise.
Yes, they are. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's break it all down. There are so many different things being thrown at us about this. It makes it very difficult to discern exactly what it's going to mean. We're talking about a lot of costs that are associated with this. That, you know, if we were going to allow people to vote earlier, it's going to cost $2 million. I don't get that. We're talking about limiting it to a period of 6 days, only during business hours, not on Sundays. You can't come in a pink shirt. It's very difficult to discern exactly what's on the table here.
Right, that's right. And that's part of the concern is that the ballot title doesn't give voters the full sense of really what they're voting on here. And make no mistakes, Advancement Project advocates for effective early voting. Missouri is an outlier. The vast majority of states allow voters to cast ballots prior to Election Day. And we think that would be a good fix for Missouri as well to make voting more accessible to people. But this measure is misleading in that it actually restricts early voting more than it provides for it. In a variety of ways. And then it enshrines those restrictions in our state constitution. And it would never allow the legislature to change any of the aspects of early voting without a constitutional amendment. And that's the wrong way to go about making voting more accessible for voters. This actually restricts our ability to have effective early voting in Missouri. First off, it doesn't guarantee that early voting would exist at all. The language of the measure only would allow for early voting if there is a particular appropriation. It doesn't require early voting to happen at all. And it's not clear that the legislature would make such an appropriation in these times of budget crisis. And it limits early voting only to 6 days, which if you look at the average states around the country have typically between 10 and 30 days. 6 days is not enough time. Folks that have studied what makes early voting effective have shown that you need enough time for people to be able to access it. The point is that many people can't get to the polls or find it very difficult to get to the polls during that one day, Tuesday, and early voting is intended to make voting more accessible. 6 days, especially when it's limited to business hours and no weekends, doesn't do that. Look, if you look at the states that have early voting, the ones that are most successful have times that are not during the work hours and on weekends because that's when people have time to go. And that's when groups can help gather people and get people rides to the polls and people that otherwise don't really have a lot of access, it provides access for them. And this measure would make that kind of access unconstitutional.
What prompted
What
prompted putting this on the ballot in the first place?
Well, everything in Missouri is political, right? All of this came out of a political skirmish between groups that were working to get a citizens initiative on the ballot that would have provided for that expanded early voting. That measure is, in fact, not on the ballot, and this came out as a competing measure that was, many believe, intended to thwart the other measure. But the fact of the matter is, an Advancement Project, we're out of the partisan fray. We're looking at, does this measure help or hurt Missouri voters? Does it make voting more accessible for Missouri voters? And on the balance here, when you talk about enshrining all kinds of restrictions on the legislature's ability to make voting easier into our Constitution, I have concerns about that. And I don't think that this really, that the voters really understand that, or that the language that they're going to see on the ballot really tells the whole story.
Denise, good morning. It's Farah Fazal. So the proponents of this measure really believe that you can have early voting at a reasonable cost. Does it cost that much to have early voting?
Well, there are important startup costs. But I think that what we've seen in states around the country is that over time, those that election officials really like early voting because they can spread the work out over a period of time, and it makes the election day operations less expensive because people are voting over a period of time.
We've seen the number $2 million, and I'm just wondering, as Farah mentioned, what's the price tag for?
Right. Well, we don't have early voting in Missouri, so we don't have a specific price tag here, but there are going to be startup costs to putting a new system and new process in place, certainly. But again, what we've seen in states around the country is that those costs end up getting mitigated by the reductions in strain on election officials on election day.
Senior attorney for the Advancement Project against the early voting amendment is amendment number 6 on your ballots tomorrow. Denise, thanks so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
And I guess maybe the upside on this, Farah, is if they don't have the early voting, then ABC won't be calling elections a week before Election Day. Come on, that's comedy.
Well, it is a comedy show after all.
That's
We're
election.
doing a little bit of humor this
Yeah,
morning.
how hard it is to find election comedy. All right.